broadcasting to the universe. Hello, people. Hi, hello, Diane and Sue. Spontaneous creativity chat. That's what I said. Sandy, good to see you. 8:15. I'll be able to go today until about 9. Hi, Jeff. I have to jump over to medium in a little bit. But oh man, something just kind of neat happened just now. I was driving back home, dropping off my kids from school, and on the radio um came the song from um Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Pure Imagination song. Somebody did a remix of the Pure Imagination song. And growing up, it just brought a tear to my eye. It honestly did. And it was not so much the song itself, but just the memory of Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. And there's that scene where he's sitting there he's like, oh, they come into the room where everything is edible. Starving artist. I am a kindred spirit. I know what it's like to be a starving artist. Christian, good to see you. But they come into the room, the garden room, where they're mixing the chocolate by waterfall. If you want to view paradise, that moment, and he sits down and he drinks from the teacup and then he bites the teacup. So that somebody did a remix of that Pure Imagination song. It was just on the radio, and then by the end, it's all like lively. And actually, it just hit me because yesterday I was reading my poem, my happy birthday poems to Lawrence with a lot of love, but also quite a bit of mischief. Because I'm about 80% mischief, and I think starving artists should probably be about 80% mischief too. You have to be, because the world is so silly, you know. And when I was reading those poems to Lawrence, there was one section in one of them where as I was reading it to you guys, I was performing it, and I thought to myself, that kind of sounds like something Willy Wonka would say, and it made me feel, it filled me with pride to even think that even for just, I'm not saying like the whole thing is at that level, but there was just a brief moment in that poem that evoked, hi, American citizen, that evoked that same level of just kind of creativity. And I just, the more I can just do that and have more of that and less of the gaps between it, then I'm making progress. I think I'm improving. So I'll just keep writing because I get a little bit better every time. I always say I don't need to be as good as Roald Dahl. I would be very happy just to be in that space between Roald Dahl and every other children's writer. It's Hi Lefty Prof. I'm still kind of high on that talk from yesterday. I don't know if you guys managed. I haven't posted the replay yet, but Nick did, where we had Marlon Weems on, and Marlon Weems brought his daughter on, who is just, my God. I mean, she's just graduated from college, and she was saying all these things, and it was just sort of like time capsule moment. Because you're like, well, first of all, her art was just so astounding. I mean, it looked like she could teach Rembrandt a few things, to be absolutely serious. Yeah, just fantastic. And but then, so you're looking at that art, and you're like, holy shit. And then you're talking to her, and she's just like, I'm still discovering myself. And I was just like, yeah, me too. That's just part of being a creative. You're in this boat to the end. That's not, don't have it in your mind that you have to have this confidence in who you are, because that's the end of you as a creative person. That's just settle in, and all that imposter syndrome and all those things that make us, not, they make us doubt, and they make us stop creating, and they make us stop being, stop enjoying our mischief. I was thinking today too on the drive home, and as I was coming back from school, that V for Vendetta kind of reminded me of Willy Wonka too. There's something in those two characters where they're just the silliness and the acts of rebellion, the defiance in mischief. Oh, and I want to always say, there's that scene. There's that scene in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where it's my favorite scene of the whole movie because it's so weird. And that had such an impact on me when I was, young. What year did that come out? It must have been about 1980. So that's one of those ones. Star Wars was the big one, but things like Superman and Willy Wonka were they were in the rotation. And there's the scene where they're licking the wallpaper, and he goes, "The snozberries taste like snozberries." And, I think it's Veruca who goes, "Snozberries? Who ever heard of a snozberry?" And he grabs her by the mouth. He grabs her by the mouth, and he's like, "We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams." Like, the parents are looking on. And again, I guess that's why it fits in with V for Vendetta, because it's the pissed off English teacher again, where you just, like, take these random lines of poetry and just lecture kids with them. I don't know. What can you say back to that? And that's, having watched Willy Wonka so many times when I was growing up, I used to kinda do that to people when I was walking through my school. I was reflecting on that. No, Wonka. Willy Wonka, you know who it is, Ricardo. Come on now. Actually, this it was prior to this Christmas, we were looking for movies to watch, and somebody so and it's always a little bit of a battle. We ended up watching all these, like, The Princess Diaries and all these she's just weird. I don't like them. Like, the Hallmark romance movies for Christmas, and, we were sitting there trying to find something to watch. I'm like, "Please let it not be that." One of my daughters is like, "How about Willy Wonka?" I'm like, "Yes," click. I put it on so fast. Yeah. Ricardo. Well, that would have been, Roald Dahl. He would have known that word too. Well, he actually was born he grew up in England, but, born in Norway, if I'm not mistaken. I was reading I've been reading, James and the Giant Peach to my kids again, and I've been thinking my next writing project, I've been working on a book for them. I'm almost done with it. I'll probably share that book here. It's turned out pretty good, and it's actually kinda interesting. All these things tie together because it's a fantasy book, but the main character in this fantasy book is an artist who's like this extreme artist, extremely good artist. Is very can do things very fast. So I've been playing around with all the things that a really good artist can do. So it's kind of I'll have to talk about that with Hallie, Marlon Weems's daughter, just because I wanna that was really such a fun because I mean, just brilliant. It's always fun to be in the presence of brilliance like that. And oh, no! Yeah, you gotta watch the Gene Wilder Courtney says, "Confession, I've never actually watched the full Gene Wilder version, only the Johnny Depp reboot." I don't particularly like the Johnny Depp reboot. Roald Dahl himself wrote the screenplay for the one with Gene Wilder, and Roald Dahl, his day job was he wrote screenplays. He did a James Bond movie. He did, You Only Live Twice. So he was kind of involved in Hollywood. He even had this short-lived show like The Twilight Zone. It was like Roald Dahl's Creepy Tales or something like that. Um, but yeah, his original one is and he wrote I think he wrote all the song I mean, his poems and his books are always really funny. I guess I was reading my just kinda goofy poems yesterday. I guess I do kinda allow myself to do that, where I don't, like, consider it poetry, but I like writing silly poems because they just make people laugh, and playing with rhymes is something you do eventually. Oh, this evolution. I mean, I tell you what, I always wanted to write, and I mean, just this is wonderful having the time to chat with you guys like this and be able to talk spontaneously about things that are creative and the creative process and all that. That brings a lot of joy to my heart. But, when I was 18, I wanted to be a writer. And it's like, well, how do you do that? There's no money in it. And so that's why too, I'm just kind of so motivated to talk to Hallie again because there's so many things I've learned in these last 30 years that would have been easier to have somebody just sit down and speak straight to me about like what you have to do. Like a creative's life is you're just not going to make money. I mean, just start with that. But then like with any business, if you're a startup in any business, you're not going to make money for a couple of years. That's just kind of the way it works. And so you cut as many expenses as possible. And for creative, that means you live in kind of a dilapidated house and you learn how to fix everything yourself like I do, and tile and the plumbing and you know how to drywall. I know how to do all that. I fix my floors, do all that stuff. Um yeah, and I just want to be able to talk about that. It's just like this development though, it is kind of revealing. I hope because in this last year I've gotten my writing has gotten so much better. I'm going to read for something for you guys in a little bit. I have this story called The Great Cookie Catastrophe. I'm going to have to go find it, but I've resolved that I need to read something every time I do one of these spontaneous talks. All right, let me go through these comments. Yeah, your cultural education is complete. Oh, it's so good. That original Roald Dahl and his poetry. I guess the only one that the first song he does it, the one by the Candyman, I guess that one's not a Roald Dahl. Um, I guess now I have to double check because I know he did the screenplay. I don't know if he did all the lyrics for the songs, but they do sound like him. Is it 72? That sounds maybe it is. Maybe you're right. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. That original That original what Gene Wilder was something special in that, but it is great. The Witches, that feels very appropriate for these times. Yeah, that one is good too. That one's kinda dark. It's funny, but it is kinda dark. Oh, gonna sneeze. Oh, so much. I should go dig up that story I wanted to write to you or read to you guys. Let me see if I can remember the name. It's called The Great Cookie, Catastrophe. And I just wanna read that. But yeah, oh, here it is on Medium. I know I have it on Substack too. I wanna read the Substack version. I've got like I was telling you, I've got this story I've been, well, I guess maybe I changed the name when I put it on. Okay, I can read the Medium version. Yeah, James and the Giant Peach. It's not as I mean, I wouldn't say that's as dark as The Witches. The Witches is pretty awful. Oh, no! Sorry, Courtney, you're gonna miss me reading my story, but you can watch it on the replay. And I haven't published a replay yet of that talk with, Hallie, but I'll do that probably tomorrow. I talked with Jen Budd yesterday, and that was really an informative decision just to give us yeah, have a good day, Courtney. Um, that was really an important decision or conversation just to get the reality of the corruption. Because, like, as much as we're seeing corruption in the Epstein files, it's clear that there's the same level of corruption in border patrol. But we'll cover that later. That'll be in that. Yeah, that'll be in that replay. I'm kind of in a good mood, so I'm, I'm not going to talk about that more. I'm going to talk. I'm going to read this story to you now. This is because I think I like this idea of taking a little time every morning and reading my old stories. And I used to sit down and write these just kind of fun stories, funny things that happen with the family. And I never could make any money on it. And that's the other thing. A lot of writing is just like that, or any kind of creative processes. I would put them on Medium, and like the two or three people on Medium who are writers. Thank you, Amber. The two or three people on Medium who are like writers first and foremost, and not just content creators trying to make money. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, more of this, please," and then the story would make me like 70 cents, so I just couldn't write them. But there's a smattering of these, and it's fun to have a collective audience because they work really well in this kind of thing. So a lot of your creative process, and I'm going to talk about this with Hallie, is just figuring out a way. The trick is, I mean, she's got the talent, and the next thing she has to learn is the speed. You have to be fast. She's got the talent. That's the hardest part. Then you speed up, but then you just have to kind of take advantage of these opportunities because your success is just not going to look how you think it's going to look. That's the real critical thing, because we put in our mind this idea of what success looks like, then we judge ourselves because we're not reaching that absurd thing we just randomly decided. So you need to put that out of your mind and then just start building up, a mechanism. But the other thing I told Hallie was the thing about a creative, yeah, you have to extend as much as possible the window that allows success. I brought up the story of how Harrison Ford, when he went to Hollywood, he noticed everybody else was what they'd run out of money and then they'd be done. And that was the end of the dream. And so he learned how to be a carpenter. He's like, okay, now I can make some money as a carpenter. This keeps my window open, gives me more opportunities to, you know, land that dream role. And he taught I've spoken the same way. I mean, he obviously became a superstar, but really just my objective has only ever been, make as much as a high school teacher writing. That's all I want, just so I can continue to do it and continue to survive and not be too miserable and uncomfortable. We're more or less there. Fortunately, I have a lot of support, and you guys are all part of that support. So I'm going to read this story now. The story is called The Great Cookie Catastrophe. All right, goes like this. What happened? My wife said. She was looking at the kitchen table. The kitchen table was overflowing with frosted sugar cookies. They came in all shapes and sizes and were decorated with a multitude of colors applied in creative designs. We made cookies. I can see you made cookies. Her eyes drifted to the walls. Fragments of cookie dough spattered the surface like shrapnel. A long, thin strand of dough hung like a noodle off the slowly rotating fan blade. I looked at my two girls. Their beautiful cherubic faces were covered in flour. Glancing down at my hands, I could see they were covered in flour as well. Why did you make so many? Let me start from the beginning, I said. I made eye contact with the girls. They looked at me innocently. They were giving me a, you better handle this, Daddy, look. I took a deep breath. Well, we needed something to do, so Sienna suggested that we should make cookies. You said we could, Mom, Sienna added. My wife just looked at her and nodded. So I dug up a recipe and we went to the store for ingredients. Ingredients? I nodded. You made them from scratch. She was incredulous, as if in this day and age such a concept was beyond belief. Why didn't you just use the box of cookie mix that I left for you guys? She pointed at a box that sat next to the sink. I picked it up. All you had to do was add water. That would have been easier. Oh, that's probably what Sienna meant. I set the box down and surreptitiously dusted off some of the flour that had come to settle on the top. Well, as I was saying, I went to the grocery store with my recipe. I had to buy flour, eggs, baking powder, frosting, sprinkles. I could see you bought sprinkles. I looked around. There were sprinkles everywhere. She sighed. I can't believe you made cookies from scratch. My wife seemed to think I'd gone insane. I just nodded slowly. Yeah, we spent like $40. Then we came home and started mixing. We helped, Mom, Avril said. Yeah, they sure did. I paused to collect myself. You see, that's when things started to get out of control. When they went to help, they sure do help. I reflected on the intense focus and industriousness of children who are committed to a task. They come trotting up and somehow manage to get their hands and toes and heads everywhere. They show surprising strength and agility as they climb up onto tables and dangle from light fixtures. Can they fit their whole head in the mixing bowl? Yes, they can. 2 seconds later, they're completely covered in flour, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. None of this is done with any malice. Instead, it's all driven by cute curiosity and a sincere desire to be helpful. We mixed the dough, and I had Sienna flatten it out, I said. But we don't have a rolling pin. We used a plastic mat. I stomped on it, Mommy, Sienna yelled. My wife blanched. Yeah, she climbed up on the table and stomped on it. I think one time she sat on it. Sienna nodded in excited agreement. How very enterprising, my wife said. Then I cut out the cookie shapes, Avril said. We both did. Yeah, we both did. I cleared my throat and trembled a little bit. Flashbacks of the kids crawling all over the table, the walls, and the oven came to me. I think I dove to stop them from falling about 96 times. They never lost their nerve, though. No, they just became more emboldened as I crumbled into dust. Once the first batch came out of the oven, it became even more complicated. The pan is hot, Mommy. Super hot. There would be a brief reprieve with the cookies in the oven, but the second we pulled them out, all the excitement would begin again. And first I had to keep them from burning themselves. Then we had to load up the new tray. Then I had to keep them out of the oven as I put the tray in. That's when we started decorating. Yeah, between loads, they'd start to decorate. This went on and on and on. It was like the dough was eternal. The whole thing started to accelerate. It was chaos. The girls started singing. It all reminded me of the penguin scene from Mary Poppins. My wife looked around again and shook her head. I still can't believe you made cookies from scratch. Here, Mommy, try this one. I decorated it, Sienna said. Try this one. I decorated this one, Avril said. My wife took the proffered cookies and took a bite out of each. She gave us all an approving nod. They're good. Hooray! The girls cheered. And then they ran off to perform some other task with their typical delightful intensity. At that point, my wife seemed to recognize I was traumatized and gave me a hug. Good job, Daddy. Now we have a lifetime supply of sugar cookies. I picked one up off the table. It had a mound of frosting the size of half a baseball. I took a bite. Hey, I said, somewhat surprised. When you make them from scratch, they're way better. Well, you can be in charge of cookies from now on. My eyes widened at the thought, but then I realized. One glance at the table overflowing with cookies made me realize we wouldn't have to bake any more for a long, long time. I can't believe you made them from scratch, my wife said. Then she laughed. All right, that was the end. Oh, okay. I was wondering if I was going to have I was wondering if I was going to have comments, and maybe I lost y'all. I'm still rolling. Any thoughts on my lovely story with my kids? Just a little bit of mischief. mischief in the morning. So yeah, today is gonna be a good day. I don't have too much as much on the schedule. I should be done. There's one heart. One little there's a couple more. Thank you. I'm sitting here begging for my hearts. But I do have to sit down. There's a place, I think, for writing these fun stories, these adventures with my kids. Thank you. There's an adorable, yeah. I like these little memories, and I think I don't know, at the end of things, I will like to collect you kinda think of what's gonna be collected up, right? Of the stuff that you've written in your whole lifetime, and there's this handful of times I've just sat down and rattled off a story about, something that happened with my kids. There's this one time we went to the park and we were swimming in the park, and there's a little creek that goes through there you can swim. And my daughter got this gigantic spider crawled up on her, and it was as big as her chest. And I looked it up, and it was like this spider is the biggest spider in the state of Wisconsin. I'm just like, "Oh, there's a spider in your chest." And she was all mad at me for taking her to the park like it was my fault. And it was this completely harmless spider, but it must have been terrifying because it was bigger than her head. I mean, it was just this gigantic spider. I gotta write that story down too. Yeah, more and more of the stuff like that, I think, is what we have to gravitate to, especially with all the awful things going on today. Later on today at 10, I'll be talking with, Daedra again. I'd had that, yeah, thank you. I had that talk a couple days ago with Liz, who is teaching in a rural area, and I really continue to wanna dismantle, like, the mindset of, just the white supremacy mindset that we just disregard, and I think there's just too many assumptions about it, and I think, it ties into my theme of mischief and just, like, spontaneous creativity. You can always dismantle it. That authoritarian mindset is so fragile. And I think we've danced around sketching it out. You have all these dystopian books, 1984 and Brave New World and things like V for Vendetta and The Hunger Games and all these other things. And so there's a common theme there. Um, but what I think they lack is and something that I wanna explore more is a lot of people it's the response from the outside. They see the enemy approaching and that, like, they seem indomitable and terrifying. But I often reflect because I grew up in a situation like that where they were pushing that mindset, and I remember being in classrooms, with just these awful teachers, because it was this rural conservative community. There were some good ones, there were a smattering of good ones that saved me, but there's just too much pressure on people to conform, and even people that are and that's kind of the secret of the whole white supremacy mindset is it tricks otherwise good people into enabling and performing acts of abuse, and that's the thing that we have to work against and fix. And just being able to kind of express the weaknesses, encourage other people to be creative and sparkly. That's the word from Roald Dahl's other book, the Danny, the Champion of the World. He says, and it's a story about a young boy and his father, and they have this really beautiful relationship, and the boy refers to his father as Sparkly, and he talks, and that's where I was. This relates to Lawrence because when I had my daughter do a picture of Lawrence for his profile, I was like, "Here, do sketch these 2." And I said, "Make sure you capture Lawrence's eye smile." I gave her that direction, like, "Okay, how do you even do that? I don't know, but you're the artist. Capture the eye smile." My daughter's like, But then she captured it, and I sent it. I told that to Laura. Well, I think that's a nice thing to say to somebody. It's like, "I like your eye smile," and, because it is. In Danny the Champion of the World, Danny says his dad never smiles with his mouth, but it's always an eye smile, and an eye smile is a better smile because you can't fake an eye smile. You can just go like this, and it's not a real smile, but if it's with the eyes, it's genuine, and I think that's beautiful. And I think maybe too, when it comes right down to it, as I read, there's just these moments and all these things we read, and I guess it's even true with Roald Dahl as you're reading along, and there's probably passages that aren't quite at the level of the other ones, but when he really hits that moment, it's sublime. he hits those moments where it's just sublime, and I've been thinking a lot about these books I've written for my kids, the fairy books. I wrote a poem, it was actually, yesterday after talking to you guys and doing my poems for Lawrence. When I was out walking with the dog, I'm like, "I'm gonna write another poem for this, this morning chat, the spontaneous morning chat." So I did it in a voice note, I still have to fix it up. But it is just about that process of writing these stories for my kids, and, the mischief. I was thinking who the mischief character is because it's the fairy. There's this plucky fairy, and she's the star, but she's designed kinda after my daughters because 'cause they're just so, precocious, and they always wanna follow the rules, and they're kind, and it's good to have a character like that be the protagonist, but then the dog the dog, like, the family dog is the character, and he's the one that has a little bit of mischief in him, and I guess he's the one that is based on me as much as he's based on the dog. I wonder if the kids will pick up on that. If they, and hopefully that's my dream, that years from now, when they have kids of their own, they'll read these books. And for me, that's a dream. And like for them, I think it's just like a foregone conclusion. I think, because when you grow up, what do? You do try to recreate. Well, most people do, especially if you. I hope they will reflect and think that they had a good childhood and try to recreate some of those moments of magic. I've got plans already for when I have grandkids. One of my plans is, I figured, there's no reason, once I retire to not dress up like Gandalf, every day. And I want to be just this eccentric old guy. Kind of looking forward to that. Because once you get yeah, I mean, once you get to a certain age, people aren't gonna, just dress up like Gandalf, and, like, the kids, like, they might as well, like, "Here's our grandfather, the wizard." I mean, they won't know me in any other way, so I can come with my big hat, just be like, "It's time for an adventure," show up with the kids, and every time I come to visit, have maps, and go to the park and have buried treasure out there for them to find. These are the kind of things I'm thinking. My poor wife, because my poor wife is always very fashionable, so she'll be along with me, but I'll be dressed like a wizard with my staff, like, "Oh!" Like, I have to learn just, like, some sparkle bags, the kind of things that little kids get all excited about. I'll probably dedicate I'll probably dedicate the last 10 years of my life to just being this eccentric, like, wizard who entertains little kids, and then, and then I'll read them the stories. "Here's a story that I wrote." But, yeah, I mean, yesterday too, I mean, that was just so invigorating, that talk with Hallie. I mean, jeez, I mean, it's just the talent there was so just astonishing, and it just kinda reminded me, and I mean, I've kinda been excited about it since then, It reminded me the need for this creative mischief. We have to do some creative mischief, and, one of the things I've been doing too is and I never thought this was gonna be a thing, but I've been reading Ellie Leonard's book, The Death of a Mayfly. I read a chapter for her yesterday, the day before yesterday, and I wasn't super happy with it because she introduced a new character, and he had and it just says, well, he has an accent. So I was like, okay, like, as I'm normally, I'd send her my reading, which is a first time reading. I don't read it through because I think it's kind of neat. I think it's kind of neat to have somebody send you a recording of their first reading of it. It's almost like, in a way, they kind of get as insight into my thoughts. It's like, as I'm reading this and my emotions, because I let them come out. Well, she had a character who was from Queensland, but I didn't know he was from Queensland at first. I just knew he had an accent. So I just like, okay, Canadian. So I was giving him like a Canadian accent just to kind of distinguish him from the other characters. And also it just is like a Canadian. Well, that's easy. I'm from Wisconsin, so I can fall into a Canadian accent pretty. And I was trying to be really subtle about it. But then it's like, oh, he's from Queensland. So then I tried to convert my accent a little bit more, Australian. You get a little Australian. It's accents are always in the vowels. You have to. So I have to practice it a little bit. I wouldn't want to do it that extreme though. If I'm doing this reading, like a recording for a voice recording for somebody's book, but I have to practice that a little bit. And I've done a lot of voices for the stories I write for my kids because that's the best part for them is daddy making voices. And I think that's something that people like. This is something that isn't necessarily conveyed when you're shopping your book around. You're sending it to agents, and an agent looks at it, and they're like, "What is this?" And it's like, give it to your kid or read it to your kid and use the voices because I had to write a set of instructions. It's like, because daddies don't wanna just passively sit there and read, they wanna be involved, and that's the whole key to reading stories to your kids. No books are really read like that, right? Or no book has been written like that, except for the ones that I've written. I'm the first, and it's like a script for daddies who have always wanted, and daddies want to be performers. This is the dad joke thing. You want to be like the center of attention. And like easy accents, like a pirate accent. The pirate's name is Captain Rapscallion in the book, which I think is I'm delighted by the name I gave him. So there's the pirate and there's the dog, and then I have a mouse swordsman, and it's all kinds of things like that. And you have to perform it. It's a story that needs to be performed, but not in a film. It needs to be performed in a bedroom by a dad, who doesn't have fun stuff to read to his kids because it doesn't exist. So that's the gap in the world that I'm trying to fill. Amber says, the best privilege that comes with age is the freedom to be exceptionally eccentric without the social consequences. Yeah. And I've long been semi-immune to social consequences. They always called me weird when I was in school. And I kind of played on it. Um, Especially when you're doing things. I mean, you have like Willy Wonka as an example. I aspire to be like Willy Wonka. Oh. But kids, I'm looking forward to it. It's sorta like, not for a while yet. I mean, my kids are just in high school still, but it's one of those things I kinda think about, to be a to take everything I've learned as a dad and do an even better job as a granddad, I think would be yeah, that'd be a worthy next phase of my life. I got people just sitting you're just sitting there, I'm not getting all that many comments, but I guess that's nice. Maybe I'm being engaging enough, but go ahead and ask your questions if you have questions. I'm gonna have to go on a little bit because, um, I have to jump over to Medium. Allison Wilts is doing the pub crawl on Medium, so I'm gonna try and jump in with that because I am one of the editors for Cultured over there. But to finish that other thought, I never thought that people would be asking me to read their books, and I kinda like that. If I can narrate people's books, I'm more deliberate. I slow down and try to have a little bit more of a listenable tone. But, my wife even says she listens to some of my, recordings when I'll sit and do my readings, she'll listen to those, and she says it's soothing. So I hope you guys find that to be the case. I do have to remember to slow down because I get kinda manic as I start, in the flow state. And the creative process for me lately has been I just have been in the flow state, like, all the time, and it's exhausting. Um, Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, I assume the honor you mean is when people ask to you to read their work for them. Oh, and it's so wonderful. It was so emotional for me because, Dana read the poem I wrote for Lawrence, and it was so different when she read it. Um it's interesting. It makes you see things in your poem, and it was fun when she was reading it because I was sitting there waiting as I was listening for a bad word or misplaced word. As a writer, you're just, like, constantly and yesterday when I was reading those poems, there was a couple time I did on the fly edits. I'm just like, "Okay, this has gotta change." Uh, like I'd originally instead of pod of whales, I'd put team of whales, just like and that one had stuck deep in my mind where I was just like, I knew that was there because it was irritating me, even though I wasn't consciously aware of it. But this creative process of reading people's work is something that's delightful. And if I can have like a secondary business where people send me their books to read, I would love to do that. That was wonderful. So it's kind of started with Ellie and I just did it spontaneously. But do that for people. I mean, if there's something you like, well, you have permission to read and do recordings of my articles if you want to do that. I mean, just give me credit, say who it is, and do the recording, and I would love to share that around and listen to that. Uh, yeah, sometimes you see things or people's reactions and their voices. Talking with that artist yesterday, and that was interesting because such an ability to convey a story with images. She did the faces, the one where it was like it was 3 characters. One of them was holding the head, was holding a decapitated head. The other was whispering, or not whispering, but, like, at her shoulder like a conscience. And the expressions were all so precise, and it was kind of mesmerizing. You're sitting there looking at it what does that expression convey? And there was like this defiance. It was interesting though, but not anger, just like accepting defiance. There was an inevitableness on the face. And, it's just, it's interesting to see how effective people can be in sharing information visually that way, and then it takes so long to try to explain what they're trying to do. But as a writer, I try to do it in is wow. Here, I'm just kind of spewing stuff out because we're doing these kind of spontaneous talks. But um, when I'm writing poems or stories, there has to be a certain economy there. You have to shorten it up. Like the articles I write tend to be around 1,000 words or so. And I find if you get too much longer than that, you do start losing people, or the amount of effort you put in versus how much it's going to come back to you isn't enough. There's these limitations, it's kind of sad how anybody who's a creative, you have those limitations based on uh, just how you can get paid. And like, I would have written more of these stories about the kids if they just had paid more throughout the years. I should have been sitting down writing my daily journals about just the silly things they did that day. I didn't do that, but in a way, I incorporated a lot of that into these stories that I wrote for my kids. All right, Amber says, love it. I've worked with kids for 25 years, and that also allows for a lot of play, whimsy, and eccentricity. It's funny because I'm so often accused of being too serious, intellectual, and analytical. But my favorite humans are the little ones who still experience and make sense of the world through play and imagination. Wait, that imagination song came on today. The ones who still see the wonder and magic in everything. And I think that's a big key. And Amber, those of you who are here, click on Amber's profile pic. My daughter just sent over the profile pic of Amber with her dogs. And so I just love seeing those pictures. Um, I want to read your stories to my kids. Yep, there's quite a few on here. That one, yeah, I'll get there. I gotta get it. I gotta get that first one published. I'm still working. I really am waiting for my girls to um do the art, but they're so busy. That's the other thing. The world's taking my kids from me. Maybe over this summer I can hunker down and get it done. My daughter will be old enough. You have to be 16 to have a Substack. So at that point, maybe I'll convince her to have a Substack. Um, it's still, I want her to be anonymous still. I mean, Marlon came on with his daughter, but she's out of college, so that's different. When you're still in high school, you're kind of trapped. You don't, and I want to protect her. So, but we can do chats where she just doesn't show her face. Isn't it fantastic? It makes me smile every time I see it. We're talking again about your profile picture. Yeah, she does a good job with those. She captures a lot of the personality in those pictures, and we just have to be creative. I'm telling you, mischief is the key to all of this. Mischief is the key to dismantling these authoritarian systems because they're so ridiculous, and they force us to take them seriously, and they aren't deserving of being taken seriously because they can't say two coherent things, without contradicting themselves. They can't use words correctly. I wrote today that the Republican Party's idea of a responsible budget is to cut out the $50 charge to change your oil. And then the next thing you knew, you've got a $50,000 charge to change your car because the motor burned out. And then of course they turn around and blame, feeding the kids. And that's absurd. I mean, it makes you angry, but I don't think it's too, I mean, there are times when anger is appropriate, but I think if we just pivot and occasionally see the absurdity of it. When I was talking to Jack the other day, he was calling it gallows humor, the importance of that gallows humor where you do just emphasize how absurd it all is. And there's a certain power that comes. Hi, Kat. Good to see Kat here today. But yeah, I guess I've been prattling on a little bit more than always. Do you have any questions for me, Kat, or anybody else? I've got a few more minutes, but like I said, I'm going to jump off pretty quick and go over to the pub crawl on Medium. Yeah, I mean, it is really sad. And today at 10, that's kind of my hope when I talk to Daedra. Will has a personal matter to attend to today, so he's not going to be with me on my usually scheduled racism talk, but I'm going to talk to Daedra about that conversation I had with that professor about teaching in a rural area and just the indoctrination process. Nikki says, "That's why my great nieces love being around because I'll get in the bouncy castle with them and act like I'm 8 years old again." Yes. And kids are always willing to sit down and paint with you and dress up and put on character voices. I used to do serious. And one of the things we used to do before going to bed would be like, serious class. Everybody has to be very serious. And then, and it makes it fun when you're emphasizing being serious and then you say like the most ridiculous things possible. And the idea was to deliberately try not to laugh. So that everybody's like silently laughing. Sometimes we had some pretty funny nights with our serious class. It was basically imagine the eagle character from the Muppets. Good morning, Miranda. Good morning, Miranda. Good morning, friends. Miranda writes. Amber says we need to recruit from and learn from the toddlers. No one is better at derailing plans and humbling grown-ups. Yep. And they just don't know racism. They don't know hatred. Um, okay, Ricardo says, just listening today, Walter. Thanks. So I hope it's been just kind of a hopeful message this morning. I hope so anyway. We have to have those moments. And I guess, yeah, I'll publish that thing by I keep have to get her name right. It's Hallie. It wasn't Haley. It was Hallie. Um, and her wonderful art. The replay is good because you can see the art and she's talking about it. Every time I used to take my kids on trips, we would always go to the art museums and just kind of sit and talk about the paintings. I think it's so good for us. I mean, that can kind of fall off the radar a little bit. I mean, everybody is always thinking about, oh, let's go to Disneyland or all this other stuff. But if you take clever kids and you walk through the art museum, it is a more, it's just not immediate, it's not like, oh, a roller coaster. So you're losing, and you barely have to even focus on it. But if you go look at a painting and just contemplate it for a minute, it takes you into a place, just a static image like that. And I think so much of our lives just pass by us. And I guess we're seeing a lot of that where, you know, where we're pressured. And the example that immediately comes to mind is how the Democrats like just pass by the fact that there's voter interference in the state elections all the time. And they're just like, well, time to unify around the candidate. It's like, wait, just pause. Let's do something about that voter suppression. But then they get mad at you. So just that stopping every now and then is a good point of emphasis. Kat says, my kids are in college art history class that I teach them every day. It's really fun. You teach them. It's my favorite class that we do together. Yeah, that's wonderful. And well, there's it's one of those things because there's so much to learn about art history. And I mean, you go all the way back to like the cave paintings and stuff, but even that can be kind of interesting. Depends. It always depends on the teacher, but Hallie had one. She had this ink um, drawing that she'd done, and it was the march. I think it was the march at Selma, so it included a bunch of civil rights leaders. Well, she did when she was in high school, so then it was something you could bring into your art room, and it was a statement then. Because what can they do? You've done this art project, and it's these really important civil rights leaders that the school is deliberately not talking about. And if you're this brilliant artist and you can just make this image, it's this captivating image, and you can bring it into a hostile place like a school that refuses to teach the truth about American history, you can make a really profound statement that way. And I think perhaps the reason that the radical right always is dismissive of art is because, hi, Terry Ann, is because they recognize the power of art and the importance of a little mischief, the importance of making these captivating and compelling images. I mean, this push to AI, we've seen that from the right, where they want to take the human out of it so we don't have time to be creative and to reflect, that our backs are constantly against the wall and we don't have time to express ourselves and to consider that our lives could be better, or the injustices that are all around us that are presented to us as just the way of things instead of as somebody's choice, like an oppressive choice. And art is one of the places where we can start to, you know, illustrate or emphasize or highlight the cracks in the mechanism of abuse that, and encases us all. What is the word I was looking for there? That surrounds us all. Estamos encarcelado. I guess I was looking for the word in Spanish. Um, that's my brain leaking again. The Spanish is leaking into my English. but go out today, if you guys need a break, and I like to give people things to do, for activism. And, I mean, it's sort of like I should have told, Hallie too, when Rembrandt did the Night Watch, I don't know if you know that painting, the Night Watch. It the Night Watch was like the police department in wherever even was it? I can't think of the town. Amsterdam, maybe? Um, the police department hired him to do a portrait, like portrait of the police, and they just in their minds, they were thinking, "Oh, we just want, like, 2 rows," like all the people standing there, like, like a typical painting. Well, they hired Rembrandt to do this painting, and, he did this painting where the soldiers look like musketeers, they're coming out like this, and they're just bold, and the colors are bright. They're marching forth, and it's like they're called to battle, and it's just like this tremendous painting. And of course, the guys are like, "What the hell is this? This isn't what we wanted." It's like one of the most he created like one of the most famous paintings in human history, and we know that now. And it's important to think that it's like, okay, like for 99.9% of the history of that painting, everybody's recognized it as a masterpiece. But in the other 0.5% was when Rembrandt was standing there and they're like, "We're not paying you. This is a piece of shit." And just consider the aftershocks in your psyche when you have to put up with that crap all the time. I got another story about the Night Watch, but I'm kind of running out of time because I have to jump over Amsterdam. Thank you, Kat. Yeah. I've got my mind is pretty good at just like uh retrieving these random facts. But it is, I mean, that's something to convey to that wonderful artist, Hallie, she is literally that good. And she's also in that 0.5% moment where the world just feels like it's against you. And it's just like, you just have to be bold. And you just have to look at what you've created and compare it to everything else and just be like, I don't care what anybody says. This is right. That is not as good. And go forth. And I had a professor who told me, it's like, when you talk, it sounds like arrogance, and it's like, well, it sounds like it may be, but it's also arrogance to presume you're right and that you will continue to be right for the next 200 years. So let's just have a little bit of skepticism sometimes. Yeah, her art was fantastic. Cambia también, Ricardo says. Good. I'm glad we have other Spanish speakers here. But yeah, I'm gonna need to get going. I have to jump over to and support Allison Wilkes on Medium's Pub Crawl. She's my good friend, and I haven't talked to her in a bit, so I'm going to go do that. I'm one of the editors there with Cultured, and we're seeing more and more people. Feel free, if you are on Medium, to hunt me down on Cultured. I am a Boost nominator there, and I always want to support everybody as much as I can. So everything that we can do, together we rise. Thank you, Kat. We're going to have to talk again sometime soon. We haven't talked in a while. I appreciate you all as always. I don't know if you are not a free subscriber, please become a free subscriber to Rise Together. And if you can upgrade to become a paid supporter, that is always a super big help. But everybody's up facing economic terrorism. I realize that. So none of it is required. And don't take food off your table. I'm going to come back in. There's other things I'll need to reflect tomorrow on the talk I'm going to have later today. But at 10 o'clock, I'm doing my anti-racism talk with Daedra. Maybe Natasha. I invited Natasha, but I don't know if she's coming. But hope this has given you a little bit of something friendly to think about. We'll continue to do this. I appreciate all you guys' lovely comments and your support and just being an audience for me. And I like reading these stories. I'm going to try to bring something in to read every morning, I think. Just a fun story. We need to have a little bit of light and mischief in our day. So thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you. Love you all. We'll continue to rise together, and I'll see you all later on today. Bye-bye.